So we've been learning a lot lately about executive functioning.
Executive function skills. It's kind of a buzzword these days, you know?
It's been on our radar for a bit,
has.
so we've been educating ourselves.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, and sometimes I think we are familiar with a lot of the names that fall into that executive function category, and we don't always realize, oh, you mean working memory is a part of executive
Right.
function, and auditory processing is a part of executive function. So it's really a name for a whole group of
It's a wide
skills
spectrum.
that helps kids to accomplish tasks.
Yes.
I mean, that's
Any
the bottom
kid.
line. Any kid,
Any
or,
kid.
or adults,
Or adults.
like us.
Yes.
You know, we were just having a little chat about how we could all brush up on some of our
We sure can.
skills with executive function. But I think we're hearing it because a lot of parents are finding that their kids are struggling to accomplish tasks.
Right.
And so then looking at why is that? Why is it that I'm giving directions and they can't remember them?
Right.
Or they're losing track of things so easily, having a hard time with time management or
We
being
get
organized.
calls like that all the time.
All
Like,
the time.
do.
I taught this phonics rule or spelling rule or this math concept, and the
Yes.
next day it's
gone.
completely gone.
It's like
It's
it
gone.
fell out while they were sleeping.
Yes.
And like there has to be something
Yeah.
for that, and there's a name for this.
There is, and I think that is one thing we do hear a lot is, help me because I don't know what to do. How do I build on this curriculum when here we are on day 5 and we're not remembering what was day 4 and day
Right.
3, so how do we keep going? And it is so encouraging, I think, as a parent to know that you can build those skills.
Yes.
Exactly.
It's not like you just get what you get.
Yeah.
You can strengthen those skills. You can build them, and to me, that's exciting because
That is
then
very
it's like
exciting.
challenge accepted. You
Right.
know, what can I do? Because
Well-
I really want to help my kids with this.
And homeschooling is the best atmosphere for that.
It really
a great
is.
environment because you get that individualized attention. and
Yes,
The
yes.
one-on-one with your child, and who knows your child better than you
Yeah.
do.
You can really
Right.
prep that seed
Right.
bed for them to
Yes.
grow these skills.
Right.
That's so true. It's such a blessing and opportunity because you're able to see those things that, if they're at school all day, you're not seeing
Right.
what they're struggling with. You do a little bit in the evening, but it is nice to have that extra time to see where they're struggling and be able to
Yeah.
come up with some
Absolutely.
things to help strengthen it. So that's our goal today, is to talk about some of these skills that fall under that executive function toolbox and to help give you just some simple tips of things that you can do to really
And
help
resources.
strengthen
That anybody
and
can
resource.
glean
Yes.
from, right?
Yes.
Yes, and I love that it's not fancy, expensive tools. A lot
Right.
of these are just things you do as you go
Normal
about
household.
everyday life.
Yep.
Yeah. Just start, incorporating some of these techniques and these little things, and you can see a big difference over
Yes.
time. Yeah.
So what about working memory? So
Yeah,
what-
working memory. That's not a term I don't think I ever heard growing up. It's
No.
like I didn't know it was a thing.
Yeah.
And it's such an important thing because working memory is like the brain's scratch pad. It's like, well, you guys know me, and I
The
have to
note
write
taker.
everything.
Yes.
I have to write everything or I don't remember it.
It's like the mind
That's
map.
okay. I know.
It
I
is a
typed
mind map.
everything.
Yeah. And I think for us, it's the working memory is the ability to hold something in your short-term memory long enough that you can follow instructions or that you can, solve a problem with that information.
Right.
Is it sort of like being able to hold that in your short-term memory long enough for it to then get over to long-term memory?
Yes, it is. I
So
think
to
that's
make those
part of it.
pathways?
Yes, but even in the short term for, let's say, I think one way this presents, as parents can see this, is, you give your child a set of instructions. Like maybe I want you to go upstairs to your room,
Grab your shoes or
grab your shoes, put them on, and go out and do something, whatever
Right.
it is. And they're kind of like, okay, and then they walk away and are like,
what was I supposed to
What
do?
did you
Or
say?
Maybe they get one thing right.
they remember to put the shoes on and then they get distracted and
Yes.
forget what else
Right.
you had for
Yeah.
them. But the working memory without that, it can look like a child is being pretty disobedient or just disrespectful. And I think that's where it's really tricky because sometimes kids really just are struggling.
Right.
they are trying to hold into their brains what you've said. You know, I know like kids will get busy with cooking. Let's say you're working on a recipe together and they're stirring and that's their job or whatever, and the dog starts barking because somebody's outside, and so they run away to see why is the dog barking and forget. So they're very forgetful too because they're not holding in that short-term memory what I'm supposed to be doing, what's my job right now. And so they don't come back, and next thing you know, you're reminding them again and again.
So what are some tools to work on the working memory?
Yeah, some tools. Well, one thing that I think is amazing is games, you know, because it's such
Something as simple as that? A game?
Yes, games can do such a good job of building that working memory. I was kind of doing a little research with this and looking up some different ones, and I was thinking, you know, the game that a lot of us probably played when we were younger, you sit in the car with your family or whoever, and it's the I'm going on a camping trip, and I'm taking
Oh, yes, all the time.
a rabbit.
Yeah.
And then you've got to
You had to remember everything.
Yeah.
that sequence, and then you have to add to it.
Yes.
So it's building little by little that ability to remember information, hold it in your in your mind, and then add to it. You know, manipulate that information in some way.
That is such an easy way to
An easy
work
thing
on.
to do.
Easy and fun way to work on.
Just something
a
you can do in the
skill.
car.
Yeah, and that's encouraging because most parents are probably already doing things like that
Yes.
to help.
Yeah.
And they
Yeah.
don't even realize it. Like
Right.
even the game of concentration.
Yes, that's
you know,
such a good one.
remembering.
Now, how does that
Yeah.
work?
So when you're taking cards and you're trying to find a match.
Okay.
Oh,
You have
right.
to-
Okay.
Oh, and
Leave
then
it
flip
first.
them back
Right.
over and then kind of
Right,
remember
so you have
where
to
it's
remember, right.
Yeah.
at. Very easy.
So, yeah.
Easy ways
Easy
to
things
work
that
on
you can
working
do.
memory.
Yes, a lot of card games will have you, you know, first of all, you have to remember the rules to the card game. And then you've got to remember, oh, what cards did they play? Which ones are in my hand? So you're multitasking a lot of things at the same time. And the more you do that, the more you're building. It's like a muscle. The
Yeah, I
more
was
you're
just gonna say
building
that little brain muscle
That's
in there.
skill,
Yeah.
right.
Well, I
So-
see we have Spot It on the table.
Yes.
Is that something that can help with
This
this
is such a
working?
good one for
Okay.
working
Kids
memory.
love it.
And kids love it. And probably a lot of people are familiar with this. But you know,
Yes.
I remember my kids playing this when they were younger, and it's like, oh, that's a good game to play. But I really didn't realize everything that's happening
It's helping.
while they're playing that game.
Right.
So you know, with this one, you're just setting out two cards.
Yes.
And do you guys remember what you're supposed to do?
Yes, you try to find the
You
match.
try to find the match.
Yeah, so you're holding in your head, okay, I am looking for a heart. Do I see a heart? Oh, there's no heart. What am I going to look for now? A key. Do I see a key? So you're having to hold some information that's important while you're adding to that
And
information.
very quickly
Yes.
do the recall.
And under
Okay.
that speed, it's also building just like a processing speed.
Yeah.
You know, you're helping yourself to process
How
information faster.
clever.
I know, right? So I think that's a really fun one. But also games like Uno and the set game. I don't know if you're talking about that later, but I love that one because you've got the colors,
Great
the
for visual.
shapes, the number, and they're working with that information in
Right.
various ways to help remember it.
Very
So
good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think games in general are just good for multitasking and working with that memory. A lot of memory games, like recall games, like Simon Says, you know, we all
Yes.
played when we were little.
Awesome. Yeah.
There's even
love
the
that
little
game.
round electronic one.
The Simon with the
Yes.
blue, the red, the yellow. Yeah.
That sequencing of lights and sounds, you know, you're learning to remember a pattern, and then again add, you know, more is being added to it, so it's just stretching that ability. So
And that's where learning happens, is when you're stretching
that's right.
that ability.
Right.
That's right.
So that's
Well, and I don't think I ever realized how much that working memory goes into really everything we're learning. Because anytime we're learning, we're taking information we already know, and we're trying to kind of combine it all
Build
together.
on
Like,
it.
how do we build on that and add to? So I think it is such an important thing, an important skill, and there's such simple ways to build it. So yeah.
keep working your working memory.
Keep working your working memory. Yes. I'm also just going to look here. I think visualization techniques can be very helpful. So that was one thing I saw, is that if when you give instructions, you could say to your child, okay, I want you to visualize what I'm asking you to do. And they might be like, what? You know, why do you want me to picture myself doing that? I'll picture myself going upstairs, getting in my top drawer, getting those Red Socks out, whatever it is. But by doing that,
That's a
you
good
are
point.
giving them Velcro for that auditory instruction to stick.
To stick. Okay.
So, and then you could go one step further and say, now I want you to tell me back what I asked you to do, because then
And that's
immediately they're
powerful.
having to
Yes.
act on that information.
Right, because you know that they have processed that.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So those are just some simple
Yeah.
things that we can do within the course of just everyday life.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Fold
It doesn't
into
have
daily.
to be like a separate course or
No,
a
it's
subject
like
matter.
everyday cooking or saying, go get your shoes and
Yeah.
and then, they get their they can't find their favorite shoes, so then they have to process, okay, I need to
Yes.
pick another set of shoes and then
Yes.
Right.
practicing the planning of tying your shoe. How do you tie it and getting it not too
Yeah.
tight or not too loose, but to fit just right. So
Yeah.
everyday life.
Do you guys
brings
feel like,
those
I'm
things up.
curious, do you guys feel like you have issues with working memory at all? Or do you see yourself like struggling at all, or have you?
I do sometimes holding
Yeah.
that for more than a minute.
Yeah. I don't know how often we all turn around and we're like, remember that
Yeah,
that
it's like
curriculum we were looking at?
Right.
It has this on the
What
cover.
is it?
It's about what is it called?
Right.
So yeah, but I find myself like I know I will ask. It's a red book. It has
Yeah.
a train on the
Right.
front. Like I can visualize, like you were saying, these
Exactly.
little
So that
things
does help.
to kind of help create
Yeah.
some
Right.
Velcro. I find as you get older, the Velcro gets a little less sticky.
We really have to keep working with those skills as we get
Yeah.
older, I think.
Yeah.
Well, and I also read that it affects your reading comprehension. So you might read something and be like, I don't know what I just read, because my memory is already, it's already gone.
Yeah.
So it also
Yeah.
will help you with reading comprehension, which is a big thing we want our kids to be
Yes.
able to do, is to read and
Absolutely.
comprehend and be able
Right.
to
That
remember.
is learning.
That's learning.
That is learning.
That's right. So, but yeah, I know I've been struggling a little bit with this lately, more than normal, because I'll get in the car to go somewhere. And as moms, we have a million things on our mind, right? So we'll be going somewhere and I'm like, hey Levi, where are we going? It's like,
You're in the car already.
I thought we were going to the
Autopilot,
bank.
right?
And I'm like, oh, the bank. Yeah, we're going to the bank, And then you start talking about, we got to make sure we do this tonight and blah, 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 blah. And you're on to the next thing and like, where are we going again? It's like, oh boy, I think I need to work with some of
Yes.
these working memory skills, but
Not just for our students, working memory.
for
It's
all
for
of us.
everyone.
Yeah.
And I think also tuning into how your kids learn and their
Yes.
interests, like, for science, for instance, and do they enjoy outside? Take your nature
Yeah.
walks,
Yeah.
or do they enjoy the movement and the songs and maybe draw a body scan and learn about the parts of the body instead of just a textbook? Those are just
Yes, right.
kind of some
Outline in
things
chalk and on your
exactly
driveway.
what keep
Yeah.
in mind do.
Multi-sensory ways
Right.
to take that in to help it
Yeah.
stick
Yes.
better. Yeah, it's a
So,
really good point.
I had one child that when teaching phonics, like it wasn't enough just to show a card with an apple and say, oh, that's a,
Yeah.
I put an apple in a paper sack and he felt it and
wow.
guessed what it was. That made so much of a difference.
That
And
was
just-
tangible
yes,
for him.
exactly. Right.
And that really
So-
speaks into learning styles.
Yes, and I think
know?
a lot of parents just intuitively, like I said, homeschooling is so great because they know that about their children. They're like, oh, let's try this.
Yeah.
And so
You pick up
that's-
on those little things
absolutely.
along the way.
We
Yeah.
have some other things on the table. I'm seeing some movement themes.
Yes,
Yes.
yes. Let me get into a little bit of
Yeah.
that. So we do also have phone calls that they say, "Oh, help! My child just won't sit still for
Yes.
anything." And
Oh, yeah.
there are times that your kids they do have to sit still and learn.
The wiggles.
Right.
But they have
right.
the wiggles.
Exactly. And there's these two big words that I want to talk about a little bit. And one is called proprioceptive,
Yep.
and the other one is interoceptive.
Uh-huh.
You're very familiar with those, but so the proprioceptive is basically body awareness and movement, and a lot of therapists call that like heavy work. So it can be climbing or stretching, pulling,
Like more big
yes,
body movements,
so
right?
Yes,
Yeah.
being
Okay.
in tune with your body. And sitting requires that making constant small adjustments to maintain your posture and balance. That's why that's so important. So before you sit, you know you're going to have to sit in church or on a long car ride. Have your kids do that heavy work of, doing some jumping jacks or jumping on the
That's
trampoline
so smart.
Yeah.
running around, climbing, whatever it might be. And you can even do that before, I had to do it with one child before every subject, do some heavy work
Really,
activities.
just take a break and
Yes.
do something
move.
that's
It calms the nervous system, and then they have the ability
little
to
brain
listen.
break.
Right. Or you can do it before bed or, any of those things. So, and just knowing that's available, like riding your bike or anything like that.
So when you look over and I'm doing jumping jacks later
Yeah, I'll
today,
know.
you'll know why.
But you need that break. Right?
Yeah.
And there's also, the interoceptive processing, and that's more of your inner, being aware of your your emotions, regulating your emotions and what's going on inside. Like, are you hungry? Are you tired? Are you anxious or frustrated? Or is your heart racing? And some kids are like hyper focused on that, and some kids just don't. They're not
so
aware.
unaware.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and just helping kids with that also, because they're kind of intertwined, and just, talking about that, like after they're sitting still, how did you feel? And just, just deep breathing, yoga, meditation, whatever, all those things, even household activities, the heavy work, you can help with those things.
Sweep the kitchen, like
there you
things
go.
like that.
Right,
Yes.
right.
Yeah.
But they also talk about having like a 90-90-90 position. So when you're, good posture, because you can get that deep breathing in, and that's where these come in.
These guys, okay.
Hey, that's good to think about.
Which one do you have there? The
This
sit
one
and
is
twist.
the sit and twist.
Yeah.
Yes.
So active seat cushion
I've
to
never
help
tried
with
one of
that.
these. You said you used one in college.
Sort of.
Okay.
And I didn't realize that I could have benefited from something like this until I was in college.
Wow.
Because we were in the computer lab, and I would sit there during the lecture and just twist back and forth to the point
Not
where
knowing
that,
that-
that I was needing that
Right.
in order to focus
You
on the
just
class.
naturally did it without even really
And I'm like,
realizing
man,
it.
if I had that when
Yeah.
I was in elementary school.
That would have been really handy.
What else do we have here? Is there a
the Bouncyband.
wiggle seat? Okay.
Oh, the
So
brand
that's
is
a cushion.
Bouncyband.
Yeah. So that helps your
Okay.
posture as well.
Okay.
And so how does this work? So they're able to just sit and kind
It
of,
looks
it just
a
moves
little
back and forth a little bit.
acupuncture-y.
It does look like that. Yeah. I haven't opened it, but yeah,
Okay.
it's a little sensory
Yeah.
cushion.
So increases focus, calming influence, improves posture.
All the things we want, right?
Yes.
That's awesome. It's nice to have options and tools and ways
Yeah.
to
It is.
help,
And even if, during the sit still moment, even if they have a paper clip or chewing gum or have like a little stress ball to
something
squeeze
to-
or a fidget toy,
Yeah.
anything like that will help them while they have to sit still.
Yeah.
And
We're just all so different, aren't we?
Yeah,
in the
we
way
are.
that we're wired, and our kids are also different. And little things for one kid can just make a big difference.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Being able to move a little bit, and I think the more that this has come out in this day and age, we're talking about this a lot with parents.
Right.
We're realizing these things about
Yeah.
ourselves too. You recognizing that you used to do that anyway.
Yes.
You
the
know,
little
Becoming more
twist.
aware.
And, yeah.
becoming more aware.
Like there are still, you were talking about just having something in your hands. I'll listen to podcasts or in a class lecture and I'm crocheting something.
You're kind of fidgeting with something.
And months
yeah.
can go by and I'll pick
Wow.
that project back up and I'm like, oh yeah, he was talking about that.
Oh,
really?
Like
goodness,
it's
really?
that
It
helps
just
you remember.
sensory thing.
Isn't that something?
Of like working on that project is now associated with that podcast or that
That's
lecture
interesting.
that I was listening
Wow.
to, and just how amazing
That's fascinating.
having something to focus the wiggles on
Yeah. So that
can
really
help
works.
you
right?
focus on the task at hand.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. Well, another thing I think we hear a lot that we try to help address is issues with planning and time management and just organization skills. And I think a lot of times we see this as, kids are struggling to ever get a task started, or they procrastinate for a long time,
Yes.
or they feel completely overwhelmed with a task we've asked them to do. Like, I would like you to go clean your room. And next thing we know, there's a big
For
meltdown.
some kids,
and it's
yes,
like,
it's like,
gosh, I didn't think it was that big of a deal, But for that child, it feels at that moment like you are asking them to go climb Mount Everest, and it's such a big job. And so that's one thing I think we see. Or some kids have what I think they call time blindness, where it's really as if time is kind of, they just don't have a good sense of it. They can be in their room for an hour, and to them it's like 5 minutes, And you might say, well, what have you been doing up here for the last 3 hours? Well, I don't know. Just,
Right.
this little thing over here. And they lose track of time. So they're often late to things, or they struggle, to just keep track of how long something takes.
Yeah.
They also underestimate sometimes how long things take. Well, I can get that done real
you can
fast.
see that
Right.
in like procrastination, especially
Yes.
with like older students, that
Right.
they're just procrastinating something. Well,
Yeah.
it could just be that they have this time
they
blindness
just
a little
don't.
bit.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
So would timers help with that, do you think? Setting
Yeah,
timers
I think
or?
those visual timers, I mean, I know we've
Yeah.
talked about it, we like those. The visual timers will allow you to see your time. So let's say you give your child a task of, I want you to clean your room in the next 20 minutes. We're going to set this timer, and you can visually see it going down,
Yes.
you know, which is so helpful because all of a sudden you're like, oh, I have half my time left, and
Yeah.
it gives you a sense of how long I've spent on it and how much more I have to do.
Yes.
Very good.
So I think the visual timers are great. I think another thing parents can do is to break those large tasks down into a list of small
Yes.
tasks. Because for that child, they're like, oh, there's a million things I got to do and I don't know where
But
to
if I
start.
could just focus on this area.
Exactly, right.
That's great.
So giving them a list, and especially if you can make a visual list in some way, having something that they can physically move is helpful because they get that little dopamine release when they move one job over and they accomplish it and they're like, yes, it feels good to get one thing done, and it gives them motivation to keep going. So one thing I've seen that can work really well is to have a whiteboard with sticky notes. And let's say for, cleaning that child's room, you kind of break it down to 4 main jobs. So they need to maybe pick up all the dirty laundry on the floor and put it in the hamper. Job 1, pick up all the Legos on the floor and put those away. That's job 2. Well, that's half your room right there, but what do we have left? Well, you need to make your bed or whatever it is. Put that on 4 notes under to do on one side of your whiteboard. And as they do each one, they get to visually, and they get to pick that up and move it over, and they can see,
That feels really
oh,
good.
this is really not that many jobs.
And they can see themselves accomplishing something.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, the
and
whiteboard's great.
the
That's
goal
a
of
great
that
idea.
really is to train them to start seeing those big jobs as really
Smaller tasks.
just smaller
Yes.
tasks that they can accomplish, and it doesn't feel so big and overwhelming. So I think that's one of my favorite ways to help kids is just to have a visual reminder and to let them see that multi-step thing you ask them to do, it can be done little by little in bite-sized chunks.
Yeah.
How about you guys? I don't know. Is there anything else that you guys have heard or you've seen that really works well with that? I think the visual timers are big, and just some type of a visual, making things visual for kids is huge to help them see what you're asking of
Well,
them.
and also just let them know your expectations. Like, okay, so if we're going, okay, so first we're going to, have a 15-minute car ride, and then we're going to.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah, stay
so
here
they know
for
what to
about an hour.
expect.
Yeah. Don't just assume that they know what
Right.
to expect, but make it very clear. This is what we're doing in
Yes.
this order.
Yeah.
And
That's a good idea. Another idea that I saw to help kids start estimating kind of how long things take is to play a game with it. Just time estimation game where we say, hey, how long do you think it will take you to make your bed? And they're like, I don't know. Okay, well, let's take a guess. 45 minutes. Okay. Well, okay, well, let's put that down.
If you can do better than that, go.
I think we can do better than that. But then you actually do time them and you compare it. And they go, oh, it only took me 3 minutes to make my bed.
Right.
Wow, I was way off base, you know.
Yeah.
But they start getting a sense of how long those tasks take, And I think especially when kids are little, they really struggle with this. But even older kids can really struggle.
Yes.
So letting them guess how long and then timing them and comparing them and doing that often so that they start realizing it takes me 1 minute to brush my
really
teeth or
not a
2
big
minutes to
deal.
brush my teeth.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, here at Rainbow Resource Center, we always try to resource
Yes.
our parents and our families. And so both of you guys went to a table discussion in
Yeah. We
St.
did.
Charles. Was it in
Missouri.
St. Charles?
Yeah.
And you guys kind of developed, this is a wonderful handout on our website, the Homeschooling with Special Needs. And it's just a nice list of strategies and places to take notes, but also kind of programs for specific subjects to kind
Which
of
might be helpful.
steer you in your direction for
Yes.
curriculum options.
Right.
And even in the back of our catalog, we have the whole differentiated learner page
Love
in
that.
there.
Great resource.
That kind of gives you some really great resources there. And a newer resource for us is we've been partnering with SPED,
Yeah.
the
I love
Homeschool
that.
Heroes.
Yes.
And they have been, like this past year, their goal has been to resource families.
It's been fantastic.
They're such an amazing resource.
It's awesome to see everything that they're doing. They said they were trying to, every quarter, do a live event.
Which I love those.
Over Zoom or something like that, where families can just kind of have a break from their studies and participate with us and other publishers with an activity or something, and each one has a theme, and so their goal is just to resource families as they're learning how their students learn.
Right.
And that last one was so neat because it had that global theme, and so all day long the kids are learning, in various multisensory ways. They're learning information about
China and Ireland and India.
Countries all around the world. It was
Yeah.
really a neat thing.
But it's a wonderful, I would say, community. For people to know that,
that's a
I
great
am
way to
not
put
the
it.
only one struggling with my kid who
Yes.
cannot put his shoes on and
Right.
get out the door.
Yep.
So it's a wonderful, I think, resource for
And
those family
it's a
members.
free resource, right?
There's a free aspect to the platform as well, but there
But
are
you can
tiered
gain-
membership.
right.
Yep. And so I just love that it's an intentional community for
So
people
wonderful.
Very
to
nice.
get resourced together.
Because I think it can feel a little lonely,
It can.
especially when you, as a parent, start seeing that your child really is struggling quite a bit with something, and you're concerned, and then you look at
Right.
other kids and you go, "Why can they do that?"
Right.
And my child's struggling. So to have a community like that that you can go to and find other people whose children are struggling, and they share, "Hey, this is something that's worked for me." And no matter what your child struggles with, there are resources there.
Yes.
They've got they've got you covered. They've got
Yeah.
everything there.
Yeah.
And I love that.
Yes.
It's really neat.
And that's still just, one of the great things about the ministry that we work
Yes.
for here at Rainbow is that we are also a resource for you. As we are learning
Right.
more about these things,
We'll
we
continue to
want
share with
Yeah,
you.
to pass it
and
on.
We'd
Share.
love to hear from you too if anything has worked. So.
Yeah, let's be
Definitely.
a community together and
Give us a
share
call.
the knowledge.
That's right.